Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
A long story for the thread. I live in Louisiana, been here all my life, and will shortly be moving to another state. On the morning Katrina approached the coastline in 2005, my family evacuated. I won't get into how bad the destruction was, since I'm sure that everyone is aware of that. I was turning 7 years old when it happened, and my life felt like it was uprooted. My neighborhood friends, all the people I knew from school, my house, everything was taken away. My birthday party was on the day it struck, and that's what I woke up to. My family evacuated out of state, but returned to it a few months later. For 4 years, we settled in Slidell, Louisiana. My memories of this time period are of me being a loner, breaking into people's houses with an older friend I had made, playing video games and not socializing. I also remember doing very poorly in school. However, after meeting some old friends from that period, their description was that I was the life of the party, and quite the opposite to what I remember. Either way, the real story begins at some point in those 4 years. The older friend, CJ, I called him, and I used to hang out in this small patch of woods near my house. It was just this barren lot that had a deep recession in the ground. Behind the pit were a small thicket of woods that I don't recall being very deep, but deep enough where it was fun to explore around. Every day I would get off the bus, put my stuff up, grab a Coke for me and CJ, and meet him there. We would either chill, get in a fight with some neighborhood kids, or break into someone's home. One day I remember getting off the bus and doing my normal routine. However, CJ wasn't there, but I was willing to wait for him. As I got to the tree line, there was something standing in the woods. It looked like an emaciated human, nothing but skin and bones. Its skin was sickly white. It seemed disproportionate. It had massive black eyes, not like a gray, smaller, but still massive. It had a wide mouth filled with canine-like teeth, and it was salivating. I was petrified. The next thing I remember was opening the front door to my house 2 or 3 hours later. My mother was cooking and asked me how my day was. I couldn't remember anything, and I felt strange. Not violated, not scared, just strange. After that incident, I couldn't sleep in my bedroom anymore. I would be laying down, and I'd feel like someone was hovering over me. That weird vibrational energy you feel when someone is an inch from your face. That's what I felt every night. I'd hide under the covers, scared, terrified, uncomfortable. It was so bad that I refused to be by myself. I slept with my parents every night because of that. I'd tell them I was scared, but they were kind enough to let me stay there despite how old I was. Anytime I was by myself, I felt like I was being watched. I never felt alone. A strange incident that I remembered was when I was nearing 10 years old. During summer, my sister was next to my bedroom, and they would carry me there. It was usually my dad who carried me, but sometimes my mom would do it. A few times they would leave me there by myself. One time I recall waking up as I'm being carried. I'm looking down at the steps and I don't see feet. I don't know why I'm looking down, but as soon as I'm awake, we stopped moving. The next thing I remember is waking up in my sister's bed, but I felt off. Something about the morning seemed weird. I remember it being brighter than it should have been, and I didn't hear the sound of the morning news that my parents always watched. I asked my sister, who was 9 years older than me, if she carried me, to which she said no. Later, when my mom got home, I asked her if she carried me. She said no, that I should ask my dad. When I asked him, he denied it as well. I never could wrap my head around that. After 4 years of living in Slidell, my father had rebuilt our old home and we returned to it. It was sad to return to my neighborhood since my friends were all gone, but I had my old school to look forward to. Yet it was totally different than I remembered. The principal had been replaced by some old witch, and a lot of the girls bullied the guys, getting away with everything. I hated it there, and I always found a way to skip school. I would lie about my health. I would fake being sick. I would make myself throw up to just go home. My grades were horrible, but I didn't care. At home, I tried sleeping in my own bedroom, but I kept feeling that strange sensation of something hovering above me. I never looked at it and usually covered myself with my blankets. I was 10 years old and still sleeping with my parents. Sometimes I'd try and sleep by myself, but I'd always rush to them. Around this time, I got an Xbox 360 and started playing Halo 3 custom games non-stop. My social life at school was non-existent. I was basically a loser, and I'm willing to admit that. But I had friends online, and I had so much fun just playing games like Fat Kid on Foundry, Jenga, nearly everything. It was at this time that I started having really strange nightmares. My dreams became very vivid to a point where I sometimes wasn't aware that I was actually sleeping. One dream, my bedroom window was open. A bunch of toys are jumping around and playing with themselves around the room. They're generally easygoing and they know me. I'm confused by this sight, but say nothing. Suddenly, I could hear something heavy coming up my house's stairs. The toys began to panic, and they tried to escape through the bedroom window. My confusion intensifies as one tells me that something is coming for us, that it's approaching and it wants us to suffer. A shadowy hand stretches, reveals itself as it clutches the carpet of my second-floor house. It yanks itself forward, and I see the silhouette of this deformed humanoid with an elongated head staring at me with silence. I woke up drenched in sweat, terrified. I rushed to close my door and never slept with it open ever again. To this day, I keep my doors closed. When my sister went to college, my parents suggested that maybe I could stay in her room if I felt safer in there. I tried it for one night. I used to sleep with the TV on because I was too scared to be in the dark, and the same was for the night I spent in my sister's room. I was laying down trying to fall asleep when I felt this petrifying feeling overcome me. It's like my body just instinctually froze up. It got cold, really, really cold. I was underneath 3 covers, but felt like I was covered in ice. I can feel that strange vibrational energy directly behind me, and I can feel a cold hand wrap itself around my neck. I wasn't being choked, but I could feel its fingers digging into my skin. I heard it whisper my name, and I bolted out of the room. In the morning, I begged my mom to bless the house because I was so scared. She agreed, but my dad didn't care. To be clear, nobody else was in my house besides me and my parents. They were both asleep when I rushed into their room. After that, things began to become stranger. I usually felt like I was being watched during the night, but now I felt like I was being watched during the day. Not all the time, but often enough where I felt uneasy. I ended up staying in my bedroom because I was hitting puberty, and waking up with morning wood around your parents is awkward enough to never want to sleep with them again. Almost every night, I'd wake up at random intervals. Sometimes I'd wake up in a completely different position than I slept in, like my head would be at the foot of my bed. Sometimes my sheets were completely off my bed, and I couldn't understand how I threw them off me like that in my sleep. I kept having nightmares, but I couldn't remember what they were. Sometimes I felt like something would tug on my shirt. Not enough to throw me off balance, but enough to make me stop what I was doing. Things would also go missing and then reappear in random spots in my room. I lost my wireless mic for my Xbox once and remember scouring my entire room for it. Every night I plugged it in so it could charge for tomorrow, but it was gone. I looked in every drawer, scoured underneath my bed, even looked around my house. We didn't have any pets at this time. Eventually, a year later, I found it 2 inches underneath my bed after I was moving out of my bedroom. I also remember feeling super tired all the time, feeling detached, and also very lonely. When high school came, my sister had finished getting her master's degree and got married, leaving her bedroom vacant. I moved in because her bathroom was isolated, and I was uncomfortable with mine having a second entrance. Plus, for some reason, a ton of silverfish kept congregating in my bathroom, and I hated them so much. So I moved into her room. At this point, I had grown accustomed to the nightmares and the weird presence above my bed. I didn't accept it, but I definitely had grown numb to it where it was my normality. That's when I began seeing things. I never saw anything directly, but I do remember seeing things in my periphery and also for a split second. Sometimes I'd be on my computer and felt like I was being watched. So I'd look back and see something staring at me from around the corner of my bathroom doorway. When I'd look, it'd hurry back behind the wall. I'd be terrified, but I could never find anything in there. So I just started closing the door, but this happened all over my house. It was never the same thing. I once saw a humanoid with an abnormally long neck crawling on all fours, except its limbs were completely messed up. Like its chest was facing up and its elbows and shoulders bent in the wrong places. I saw it for a second before it scurried off like a cockroach. Sometimes I'd see something running around my house, although I don't remember much of what it looked like, but it all terrified me. I'd be scared shitless, but I never brought it up to my parents or anybody. In high school, I started having more night terrors and really bad nightmares. I'd wake up shouting, screaming, drenched in sweat, just terrified, my adrenaline pumping. Most of the dreams were of me hiding in some jacked-up woods. The trees were black without any leaves or twigs. They seemed more like twisted spikes jutting out of the ashen ground. There was something hunting me, just stalking my every step, and I would spend the entire dream just running from this thing that was trying to kill me. One dream was different, and I remember it very vividly. I'm standing on a rocky expanse that stretches out for miles. To my right and behind me, there was a thick wall of fog. To my left, far from me, was a large mountain. The top of it was being struck by lightning continuously, and I could hear distant screams or roars. In front of me, I could discern what appeared to be a forest. I walked forward towards it since it was closer than anything else. When I got closer, I noticed there were small plants growing out of the ground. Except they weren't plants. Instead of a flower, it was a pulsating heart split open. The stem was just a vein propping it up. That's just an example of what I'd see. The ground, instead of being covered with moss, was covered in a pink layer of soft, warm tissue. The trees were the only plant-like structure. They were thick, massive, towering. They had these strange, translucent fruits growing from them. Sometimes they were empty. Other times, they were filled with body parts. The deeper I walked into the woods, the fruits became larger, and the contents within started to appear more and more like screwed-up-looking humans. I was so deep at one point that the roots replaced the ground. I heard something ahead, and there was this creature walking on the roots. It was like a large centaur, except instead of a horse's body, it was a human centipede. Not ass-to-mouth centipede. I mean, like its limbs were human limbs. It was covered in skin. I don't remember anything about its face, but it had long arms, and it was holding what looked like a long, pole-like tool in one hand. It saw me, and I began to run for freedom. I woke up completely drenched in sweat, and I had to change my sheets. I was still like a loser in high school, but my grades were doing better. Towards the end of it, I began to make friends, but I still kept all these things to myself because I felt like I was schizophrenic. I was scared of being sent to a psych ward. I didn't want to take any pills or meds. I still kept seeing things, but now I would see a shadowy silhouette just loom in the corner of my room. I had become so accustomed to seeing that crazy shit that this did not really bother me. Sometimes it would be there, sometimes not. I just kept living, accepting that I was crazy. When I got a girlfriend in my senior year, I opened up about all of this. She didn't think I was crazy, but kind of accepted the weird things as well. She didn't know what it was, but she'd answer her phone if I called her terrified from a dream. After we started dating, she started suffering from nightmares too. One night, we were video chatting and studying together when she casually asked me who was in my bedroom. I freaked out because no one was in there with me. My door was shut and nobody could have snuck in next to my bed where I was. I asked her what it looked like, and she described the shadow that I had been seeing. Things changed in my mind. I realized that there was something actually around me, and it wasn't all in my head. When I went to college, I got my own apartment next to the campus. I'd wake up now standing in corners or in different parts of my room. Sometimes I'd wake up and hear scratching in the walls, but I'd just yell out, "Shut up," and it would stop. I'd become so accustomed to this stuff that it was barely fazing me anymore. Funny enough, I also lived right next to a cemetery. I got a new girlfriend for different reasons, but she would spend a lot of time at my apartment. Sometimes we'd see orbs come through. Not often, but every few weeks or so we'd catch one just floating through. She started to have nightmares as well, and even saw the damn shadow in her house as well. Whenever we'd think about it, our heads would immediately start hurting, and we'd have to stop the discussion or it'd get worse. She was really frightened about this whole ordeal, and it was something that she mentioned to a father figure I was close to at that time. He was an English professor that I had become friends with. One day I admitted this all to him, and he looked shocked. He's a very spiritual person and calmly advised that I should probably do a cleansing, as this sounded evil to him. The more he spoke to me about it, the more I realized that what was happening around me was in fact evil. He gave me sage, but had nothing else he could offer beyond just burning it. When I returned to my apartment, I smoked the whole place. As soon as I made a conscious effort to evict this thing from my life, my goddamn back, specifically underneath my left shoulder plate close to my spine, felt like it had a barbed hook in it, and every time I tried to remove it, it would burn and hurt. This was in the spring of 2017, and I started burning sage more often. I also trained myself to just punch whatever was scaring me in my dream, even if I knew it meant certain death. This proved extremely successful because the act of throwing the punch would wake me up. This mental effort to remove it was semi-successful. I suddenly could sleep normally. I'd feel better, but it would come back and I'd have to make the mental effort of evicting it once more. All I did was just burn sage and directly say, "Get out of my life, fuck off, don't ever come back." Most of the time it would work, but like I said, I'd have nightmares again or something else would happen. One small story. One time my best friend was at my apartment. We were childhood friends but reunited in college after drifting apart after he went to a different high school. We were going somewhere, not sure where, but he was leaning on my bedroom door that was closed. As I was telling him about how I was trying to free myself from this thing, he got off and walked towards my bathroom. Suddenly, the doorknob twisted and the door opened by itself. He was freaked out, but I didn't care too much. It was more like a, "You see, this is what I'm dealing with." In 2019, I came to a realization that I was severely depressed. For the past several years, including my school years, I had been forming self-destructive habits and isolating myself. Everything was worsening in that year. I was losing friends. My great grades were on the brink of imploding, and I was having doubts about continuing to live. Around October, maybe November, I had enough. Nothing was fully getting rid of it. I was talking to this chick who was a self-proclaimed witch. She did some readings and directly said that I need to get a professional. Strangely enough, I also happen to know a medium named Kari. I'm sure many of you can find her, but I don't care because after this whole experience, I fully believe she is full of it. At the time, I was talking to her as a friend because she was very kind to me, and I was waiting on some of her readings to come true. To spoil it all, none of them were coming true. However, before I realized she was a charlatan, I went to her and asked her what I should do. She sent me to her friend, whose real name I cannot remember, but she went by the name Kook. Kook had a shop in the quarter, and I went for a reading. Initially, she said it was something that she could send away, but she wanted to talk to it in another more private meeting. We arranged something. A few weeks later, I met with her and a guy named Demetrius in the 9th Ward. To sum up their reading, they told me that I should start leaving offerings for this thing as it wants to do my bidding. I left, and immediately could tell they were either full of it, or either were being tricked by something that was attached to them. The witch I spoke to agreed with the latter and recommended a guy who practices Hoodoo. I respect this guy, and I'm not going to give his name because, despite being the real deal, I've been on divination, and I don't want him to be spammed by the depraved lunatics who prowl that general. I talked with him, and he agreed it was something that needed to go. In a strange twist of events, he had taught Demetrius everything but had kicked him from his social circle when he found out Demetrius was engaging in some depraved shit. On Christmas Eve's morning of 2019, I ventured to the French Quarter for my cleansing. I walked into his empty shop and he locked the door. He asked if I was ready and I consented. We began to pray the Lord's Prayer. Then he began to chant in an African language while rattling some tool that sprayed herbal water onto me. He continued to pray, even starting to sweat as he splashed me with the water. Suddenly, he put the bowl down and began to rip my clothes off piece by piece with his hands. I was informed that this would happen, but it startled me. I was naked, barely hidden by a bookshelf, and he drenched me in the rest of the herbal water. Then he produced a rooster. He prayed and pushed the rooster onto me. He put its left wing on my left shoulder and broke it. Then he did the same with its right wing and my right shoulder. He followed the same procedure with its legs. Finally, he broke its neck in front of my face, but the rooster refused to die. He then crushed its neck and twisted it continuously until it no longer could breathe. When it finally died, he threw it at my feet, panting, and said, "You are free. What was attached to you is now attached to that rooster. I'm going to bury it, and it will be buried with it. One day it will try to return to you, but it's up to you if want to accept it or not." He then took my shredded clothes and put it in a garbage bag with the dead rooster. He gave me some herbs, a candle, and some directions. For the next 3 days, I would do a cleansing bath with those herbs and keep the candle burning. When the bath was finished, I had to extinguish the flames with my fingers. I was told to not blow it out. On the last bath, I let it burn out completely. It worked. I have not had a nightmare since. I no longer feel afraid to be alone. I no longer feel as if I'm being watched. But the story does not end. A few days after this occurred, I got into a new relationship with this girl who moved in with me and my family. I was helping her move to New Orleans, and I loved her enough to assist her. I did not do this with the intentions of getting with her, as I truly saw her as a friend. However, once in person, lust lured us into sleeping together, and the relationship followed. My depression was not magically cured, and that still took a toll on me and her. The reason I brought her up is because strange things started to occur to her. One night, while living with me, she left my house in a trance and was following the howling sounds of wolves. There are no wolves in this area, and she followed the noises to a wooden patch near my neighborhood. When I asked her if she went in, she said no. I asked her what happened. She said she doesn't remember. All she remembers is opening the doors and entering the home. I didn't put 2 and 2 together until very recently. But after that, she started seeing things. She had nightmares once she moved to her own place, and she began seeing this shadow outside her apartment complex. She and I had a horrific breakup, one that I wish could have been prevented. But I was immensely depressed, and she was intensely angry and refused to communicate. I have not talked with her since, but I fear that thing has taken refuge with her. She is not as spiritual as I am, and I think it's stuck with her and will spread to whoever is around her. After all of this occurred, I opened up to my mom and sister about the strange events, and they all believed me. They even told me a few strange incidents of their own. My sister just recalled things going missing, but nothing super strange. My mother was suffering from horrible nightmares and occasionally thought she heard or saw something. One strange incident with my mom that I remember back in 2016. One night after I left my house to bring my first girlfriend home, she said I came back inside after 5 minutes. I apparently walked past her and went to my room, ignoring any questions she had. When I got home, she confusingly asked,
"You're leaving?"
as I walked in. When I told her I'd just gotten home, she said,
"Oh, I thought you were already home. You walked right past me and went upstairs."
Freaked out, I went upstairs and checked everything. Nobody was hiding anywhere. She seemed troubled but didn't say anything. That's the end of everything. There are details I've left out, but I rarely ever talk about this anymore. I'm a loosely practicing Christian. I practice Hoodoo with ancestor reverence and also believe in reincarnation. I'm also no longer depressed. I wish I had a cure to reveal, but it just takes time and immense patience. Life isn't easier, but it is livable. My practices have kept me clean and happy, and I'd like to keep my nice, peaceful life. I recommend that anyone who is remotely spiritual to practice doing cleansings. They're easy, and you can find guides online.
Yikes from beginning to end. Any idea if someone purposely cursed you for the break-ins? What's your first initial? Not trying to dox you, but I have family in Louisiana that kind of fits your specifications.
I doubt it. Despite breaking into places, I never stole anything beyond just drinking their Cokes or Sprites. CJ took jewels. We had a foolproof way of checking if someone was home. I'd go to the front door, knock, and if someone answered, I'd ask for some fake name. When they said they didn't live there, I'd say, "Sorry, I must have the wrong house," and walk away. If they didn't answer, then we'd break in. Most of the time, the back doors were unlocked. It's G. I have no family beyond what lives here, and my family is quite small. I'm the last boy alive, and if I don't have a boy in the future, the family name dies with me.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight. Central Pine.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.